Ready to administer the oath of office, sir.
I am at your service.
General! That was a scene from the HBO miniseries John Adams, showing the momentous inauguration of George Washington as first President of the United States. As Americans prepare to elect a new president in November, non-Americans are once more confronting a peculiarity of American democracy, their electoral college. So by popular demand, tonight we explain the Electoral College in America. I'm Manolo Quezon. This is the Explainer, where we explain why issues are issues. Now, returning as our explainee tonight is Jackie Pascual, a writer for ANC. Welcome back to the show, Jackie.
Thank you, Manolo.
Well, tonight we're going to be discussing the Electoral College, but as we prepare to do that, why don't you invite our viewers to join in the discussion?
To all our viewers, join our discussion. Text REACT space X space your name, your question or reaction, and send to 2366 for Globe and Sun and 231 for Smart. Or you can also log on to our website at www.the-explainer.com.
So we're going off to Electoral College when we return. Welcome back. Well, you may have noticed that beside Jackie here are students from, where are they from, Jackie?
They're from the Polytechnic University of the Philippines in Santa Mesa, Manalo.
And I understand you guys are taking up advertising. Okay, so tonight we're going to be actually looking at an example of 18th century political advertising. But before we go into that, we like to keep innovating on this show. And just yesterday, we started something new. Now, besides our blog, www.the-explainer.com, which publishes our script, complete with links and even YouTube videos of our show, we now have a Plurk account. Now, if you Plurk, add me up. My username is MLQ3. And the reason you should add us up is that we'll be introducing the topics for our next week's show, and you can participate in forming the show to come and in proposing your questions. And so I plurked an invitation for people to put forward their questions concerning the American Electoral College. And thanks to your questions, we're able to give you everything you wanted to know about it, but were afraid to ask. Now, as always, let me start with our own national experience to come to terms with the experiences of other peoples politically. The two gentlemen you see in this Philippines Free Press editorial cartoon from 1933 were lifetime rivals, but when they decided to run together for the presidency and vice presidency in our first national election in 1934, they did so in a strange way. That is, strange to us. They were candidates who did not campaign, because to their generation it was unseemly, ungentlemanly, unstatesmanlike to campaign for the highest offices in the land. Quezon and Osmeña maintained this standoffish attitude in 1935 and when they ran but didn't run for re-election in 1941. But by 1946, when Osmeña ran for the presidency in his own right, the times had changed beyond all recognition. Now, this is one of the most famous Philippines Free Press covers of all times. It shows the old Osmeña trying to be an old-school candidate, while his rival, Manuel Rojas, was running a fast and furious campaign, a modern campaign. Osmeña, for his part, gave only one speech, while Rojas personally barnstormed the country. Osmeña lost, and Rojas ushered in the political campaigns we take for granted today. Now, in America, their leaders too went through a phase where they thought that national leadership required never being so obviously ambitious as to actively and personally campaign for the presidency among the people. In truth, that tradition lasted almost a century and a half. But what didn't last very long was the idea that you could be standoffish even with your political peers. Now, we often hear that politics is the art of the possible. And we like to think that those who have had the privilege of midwifing a nation into being are armed with an uncommon vision, that they were somehow grander than the leaders that succeeded them. Both Joseph Ellis in his fascinating book, Founding Brothers, and David McCullough in his best-selling biography, John Adams, the basis of the docudrama clip you just saw earlier at the beginning of the show, argued, however, that in America, their founding generation were all too human. They were products of their time and yet so much like us today, insecure, ambitious, confused, winging it and haggling amongst themselves the whole way through. Now, we hold these truths to be self-evident. They declared that all men are created equal. But of course, equality to them meant propertied, educated, white males, certainly not women, never blacks, and only in a very limited sense, even their fellow whites who weren't propertied and belonging to the professional class. Now, Joseph Ellis in his book says that the thinking of the founding generation of America evolved in the space of a few years from thinking of their country as primarily the states in which they were born to thinking of their country as something larger called the United States of America. But they had to wrestle with the dilemma of whether their larger country, America, should have a powerful government and how much power should be left in the hands of the states that they'd considered originally not only their homes, but their countries. So 2 centuries of constitutional success often obscures the fact that the Americans have actually had 2 constitutions. Their first was known as the Articles of Confederation. It was proposed in 1777, the year after the various states came together to proclaim their independence from Britain. Now, it was finally finished in 1781, but proved so unwieldy and so ineffectual that it was replaced with the present Constitution of the United States in 1787. Now, Ellis and McCullough both described in fascinating detail the debates that took place formally in the Constitutional Convention and informally by means of letters, meetings, and arguing in the press concerning the manner in which the future head of state of the United States should be elected. Essentially, the main fear many drafters had was that of mob rule. They didn't trust the people, just as they didn't want to establish a presidential office that would have the attributes of a king. But they had to give the ordinary people, ordinary being white males of course, some sort of say. And so they compromised on a system called the Electoral College. It would establish what's called an indirect democracy. Now, according to Randall C. Holm of the Mises Institute, as originally designed, it worked this way. The state legislatures would pass their own rules to select electors. Now, each state would have as many electors as they had congressmen plus senators put together. But no elector could be a congressman, senator, or anyone holding a government position. Now, the electors from each state would then meet in their respective states and vote by ballot for 2 people, one of whom must not be a resident of their state. Now, this was to enforce the national nature of the elections. Then, all of the states' selections would be canvassed by the U.S. Senate, and if someone received a majority of the votes, he would become president, and the runner-up, vice president. However, if no one received a majority of the votes, the Senate would then transmit the list of the top 5 candidates to the House of Representatives.